right, guys, welcome back to Of Stone and Clay, episode 118. Today we have an awesome guest. I'm excited to talk to Dan Davis, who is a filmmaker and CEO and founder of Stiry Studios. Or is it Stiry Films or Studios?
Stiry Studios is great.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that works.
Gotcha, awesome. How long have you been directing films?
We've been doing this started this company almost 9 years ago.
Okay,
So it's been a
nice.
long time. Yeah, we're over the 500 film mark,
Oh, wow.
short films. So
Okay,
yeah,
very cool. So, and then a few weeks ago, Breaking into Beautiful just came out. And dude, I watched that last night. I'm not convinced that I've cried more in a film ever.
yeah,
Like I'm easily moved to tears. I'm not like I wouldn't say I often like weep in a film, but I fully wept. And I to me what was so like set it apart from like other, I don't know, emotional documentaries, it was just so like the storytelling was so good. It just felt like, it's telling the story about somebody who's been battling cancer for 6 years, and it just instantly made me think of like, oh, I have a friend who has some tumors and has been struggling and goes to Maryland and gets treatment once every couple months. And oh, I have a close friend I went to middle school with that died of cancer a few years ago. And just like, and then seeing, this woman interact with her husband and her kid and made me think about like my nieces and nephews. It was just too
yeah,
much. It was
yeah.
like, it was really, really beautiful. And I wanted to hear, um, I love this title, Breaking into Beautiful. Tell me a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to watch it and to have that experience. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really our goal, is to have an experience with every film that we have
Mm-hmm.
put out there into the universe, that allows you to have some perspective moments. That's what we call them, that shift the way you think about your story and the way
Yeah.
you think about everybody else's story. So
Yeah.
I'm really happy and proud that you had that experience, first of all, and second of all, like, you watch this film, and Kim really, really wanted to put everything on display.
Mm-hmm.
She
Yeah.
didn't want to keep anything hidden.
Yeah.
And obviously there were some things that were either too sacred or too personal to
Mm-hmm.
put on film, but there was a lot of it that wasn't for
Mm-hmm.
her, and she wanted people to see the inner workings of her journey and her battle. And we were flies on the wall for a lot of it.
Yeah.
In fact, even when the film came out, some of her family members were like, "Oh, I don't remember you guys being there for that
Right.
scene and
Yeah.
that part of her story."
Yeah.
Um, but we chose the title Breaking into Beautiful because we were watching this, beautiful human that was going through a really messy, tragic,
Mm-hmm.
disappointing, just difficult journey. But we were watching her break into something that was so much greater than she was prior to cancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not like she wasn't a great and beautiful, incredible human
Mm-hmm.
before that, but this process that happened to be cancer for her,
Mm-hmm.
which is different for each of us in our journeys, can really break you into something that is extraordinary, that is
Yeah.
beautiful. And you can see it in those people's eyes.
Right.
When you look into Kim's eyes or others that have gone through really, difficult experiences, that pain is actually what, you know, can allow them to become beautiful
Yeah.
humans. And so that's where we came up with that
Yeah.
title.
It's kind of the opposite of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very different film.
Right. 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 But it's crazy how life can, like, the horrible things that happen to you can actually evolve you into a better version of yourself if you let them.
If you let them, that's the
Yeah.
key.
Yeah. And I don't really know anything about you, but I was looking at your Instagram, and it's funny. I always, if I have a guest on that I don't know, I'll go kind of look through their stuff a little bit. And I got a little emotional looking through your stuff because my sister has Ehlers Danlos Syndrome
No way.
and has POTS,
Wow.
and you do as
Yeah.
well. And I just yeah, it's been really hard the last couple of years, and seeing her battle through that, and she's in a wheelchair now,
Oh gosh.
and she can still walk, but it's hard. And
Yeah.
um and just, it's such a, I don't know how rare it is compared to other
Yeah.
rare
Yeah.
syndromes, but I don't know anybody else with it,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey with that and how difficult that's been. And, you know, I know you have some other illnesses that
Yeah.
you deal
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Checked a lot of boxes,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
sounds like a lot of fun. But yeah, when did you first become diagnosed with those?
Yeah, so this is for me, I would say I'm almost 40 and this is more recent that we knew what it was.
Yeah,
I've been battling this since I was, we can go trace it back to when I was young, 10
yeah,
years old,
yeah,
into my teenage years. And um, I just don't think they knew, not I don't think, they didn't know what it
yeah,
was back then. And so just the battle kind of waged for years and years. And I almost got used to just um, fighting things, with my physical health
hmm,
each and every day, to the point where it became less and less of a distraction
yeah,
until it got really bad.
right,
And this was about 5 or 6 years ago when I was just, yeah, it was debilitating. There were some really scary things happening. There were things that you couldn't just say, I'm going to tough it out. I'll
hmm,
be fine.
yeah,
And one of those things is a blood clot. I got a blood clot that wouldn't go away. And it was a really, strange thing for somebody that was seemingly healthy, and all their vitals were pretty good.
yeah, yeah,
But yet I had this blood clot, and then I had all these other strange things happening, like a stroke-like episode, and I passed out or blacked out, joint issues and dislocations, and just
yeah,
all that stuff just started to just amount to this really tough battle that I couldn't ignore.
hmm,
And really for me, it was, okay, I can't survive as a provider for my family, business owner, as a father, as a husband, if I don't address what is going on.
yeah,
And I remember one of the scariest moments for me and my wife was when my primary care doctor at the time couldn't figure out what was going on. And we were testing for all sorts of, diseases, including cancer.
hmm,
And I remember at that time thinking, well, at least we're going to know what it is, um, regardless of if it's cancer or something else. And then when those test results continued to come back negative, we were like, what's going on? And I remember calling my wife in the parking lot of a clinic in Salt Lake after getting a CAT scan and saying, I think I'm going to not wake up one of these days and not know what, and nobody's going to know what I had.
yeah,
And that's how serious it was for me and my wife. We were like, this is not good. My primary care physician was really worried. And so that journey of a diagnosis was brutal,
yeah,
because we went from place to place and nobody knew what I had, and I was feeling like I was dying, and come to find out
yeah,
I was.
right,
That
right,
was like a legitimate thing that was happening to my body. It was starting to shut down. I was starting to lose weight, inability to eat, all these critical things to just function at a very low
yeah,
level were starting to disappear. And that's where, things got pretty serious over the last, 5, 6 years.
yeah. What does that level of chronic illness do to your mental?
Oh, yeah. I talk often and openly about this
Hmm,
because it's one thing to grin and bear it
hmm,
and just work through it and be tough. And
yeah,
I was that way for a long time.
yeah,
But then when you have the pressures of life,
hmm,
as a business owner, for example, this is something that, maybe people see on the outside what I do as a filmmaker,
hmm,
as a director, as a CEO. It seems really nice, and I wouldn't say easy, but it seems from the outside like picturesque. Like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that's amazing. You get to
yeah.
make stories for a living
Yeah, I
and
mean,
all this
it's
stuff.
literally picturesque. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
We make beautiful content, and it
Yeah.
and it seems kind of glamorous, going to film festivals and red carpet events and all this stuff. And I'm not trying to portray it as glamorous. That's just the industry kind of has
Sure.
that
Yeah.
that glow to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But behind the scenes, it's been the biggest battle of my life. I'm
Hmm.
directing films, at times throughout this journey in a zero gravity chair, laying down because I
Hmm.
can't sit up,
Wow. Yeah.
My team's bringing a pallet in to put my chair on, so I'm high enough where I can be eye level to the person that I'm interviewing.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not able to carry any equipment. I'm just, showing up, fighting as much as I can to direct these films and show up for my team, and then going back and retreating and laying down in the car, or going home and laying down, or
Right.
laying down on the couch at work for 18 months straight and not having a single meeting upright.
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
it's been brutal.
Yeah.
And when you think about the mental health side of that, um, there's a difference between thriving and surviving.
Uh-huh.
And there's been times where I've been, I wouldn't say forced, but just by nature of how bad my health was,
Mm-hmm.
you're in survival mode,
Yeah.
because thriving almost doesn't seem like an option, because
Yeah.
you're just like, I got to stay alive. I'm going to do whatever it takes to stay alive. But then you start adding tools even into those moments. Those tools will show up for you, and you can still thrive in those moments.
Yeah.
And there's times where you're coming out of surgery and you're just like, I hope I can make it,
Mm-hmm.
or going into surgery, I hope I can make it. And I'm still alive on the other side of anesthesia.
Yeah.
That's different. But those times where you're alone in a hospital room, alone in your office, alone at home,
Mm-hmm.
and your thoughts are racing, that's where I think if you don't have any mental fortitude,
Yeah.
it just feels like your world is caving in.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's, if you struggle with chronic illness, it's almost an inevitability that you will struggle with some depression?
That's a good question. I know everyone that I know that struggles with the chronic illness,
Mm.
especially the people that have my syndromes, has struggled with depression and
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah.
And I can't say that as a diagnosable,
I just don't know how you could, I
fact or
just don't know how you,
statistic,
I don't know how you
but
couldn't.
yeah, it's brutal. I put it this way, and my doctor actually said it one time. He said the best way to describe what you guys go through with these syndromes, the specialist that I have here sees, I don't know how many patients, but um, my guess is it's between 50 and 100 that have my syndromes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty rare.
Yeah. Because
And
you've got
he's
a nice cocktail of
yeah, yeah.
obscure
Yeah, I have
things.
8 different rare, syndromes, and I've never in person met another male that has my
Mm.
syndromes. And so that just kind of tells you how rare
Yeah.
it is. But he said it's like waking up with the worst flu, but doing that every day.
Yeah.
So think of it in terms of that. If your mental health is not right, you stay in bed.
Right.
You don't move. And I'm not saying that some people, stay in bed because it's a choice. There's some people that literally can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about those scenarios, but when you have things that you have to show up for every day, like
Mm-hmm.
work to
Yeah.
provide for your family and put food on the table, you have to add some tools to your tool belt,
Right. Right.
or else you do stay in bed.
Yeah.
And you feel crappy enough to do that. I mean, who goes to work with the worst flu?
Yeah.
Like most people stay in bed. Well, if you wake up with that every single day, um, you will, if you're not careful, it feels like you succumb to your disease,
Right.
and you don't live, and you just live in survival mode.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard on, I don't know scientifically how to put this, but I think that's hard on your mental
Yeah.
health and your brain to
Well,
just be
yeah.
in that mode
It's,
all the time.
you got to think like, is this what my life is now?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just always in pain. I'm always in agony.
Yeah.
There's always an element of misery to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Is it, I'm sure it, you know, waxes and wanes, but can it be a very lonely experience?
Oh, for sure. Like, I think if you talk to my friends, people I do business with, and family, they would say, Dan has a ton of friends.
Mm-hmm.
He has an amazing community, and that is true.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, what's true is it can be lonely.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I didn't actually recognize that or admit that for years.
Mm-hmm.
Until I realized, I've never met anybody that struggles with the same exact syndromes as me.
Yeah.
And it was shocking to me when I met a couple patients, 5 or 6, it's actually only been 4 or 5 years ago, that had my syndromes. There was this relief from relating with them that it's hard to express.
That's cool.
It was like, I'm no longer alone.
Yeah.
And I had my wife around me. I had my
Right.
kids. I had my great friends and family that showed up for me. But like, I didn't realize I still felt lonely.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
loneliness is interesting because it almost has nothing to do with how many people love you and are in your
yeah.
life and are surrounded. Um, it's just a feeling you have, depending on what you're going through,
Yep.
where you feel alone and you feel like, yeah, I might have my wife even in my bed next to me, but I just feel alone. I feel like there's no one else going through what I'm going through.
Yep.
Um, I actually want to read this poem about loneliness,
Yeah.
and I'd like to hear your thoughts. It's by Albert Huffstickler. It's quite the name. He says, "Loneliness is a cold flame that flays the soul. When you pass through the fire, you know things that no mortal man should know."
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's a deep one.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That was a good Google search you
Would
did
you?
to get that one.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I I think it's loneliness is a lot to process.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I would describe it is heavy.
Yeah,
Like I've felt like my heart and my mind have been, and my emotions, my soul is heavy.
yeah.
Um, and I like how he used the word fillet.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a very drastic way of saying like, gosh, your heart can be just ripped
Yeah,
wide open
right.
during these circumstances in your life. And uh, it can be brutal if, like I said, if you don't add tools or resources and
Mm-hmm.
people to your life specifically to help with that.
Yeah,
Um, I think you can be pretty miserable versus finding some purpose in that
yeah,
pain.
yeah. So, what have been the tools you've sort of added to your quiver?
Yeah, a lot of them, and I keep adding them. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the thing is I realize, gosh, okay, I made it to this next level
Uh-huh.
of like understanding of my emotions. Now I got it's almost like, okay, now there's more of a
Yeah.
responsibility I have to add
Yeah.
something else. But I work with a few coaches. That's
Mm-hmm.
been really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Those are people that will show up for you no matter what, not judge you,
Mm-hmm.
and help you add tools,
Yeah.
especially when you need them the most. Um, Reading, listening to inspirational things has been really helpful for me. I can gain inspiration and perspective from other people that have
Yeah.
gone through similar circumstances or not similar circumstances, but can teach you something about grief, teach
Yeah.
you something about pain,
Right.
those emotions that you're going through. And then I would say a big thing is understanding how to rest and recover.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that is a tool that I've added that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not always great at.
And probably physically and mentally.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's hard. My circumstance is very unique and different because I am the provider for my family.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really hard for me to rest and
Right.
recover. But there's ways to do that. You can
Mm-hmm.
do that on your way home from work
Right.
instead of making phone calls,
Yeah.
listening to a meditation, listening
Right.
to music that feeds your soul. Like those are little ways I've found
Mm-hmm.
to do that. Sitting in silence. That's another thing that,
Yeah.
sometimes we're scared of our own thoughts in those
Uh-huh.
silent
Yeah.
moments,
Yeah.
especially when we're struggling. But I've just not had the radio on for many drives,
Mm-hmm.
to and from work or to appointments. And I just don't think we do that enough, whether you're struggling with a
Yeah.
chronic illness or
Yeah.
something else. Um, I mean, I could go on, but really the how I want to sum up the tools in my tool belt now is I have had to be very intentional and very purposeful
Mm-hmm.
in order to thrive with this because it has not gone away.
Yeah.
We've had some life preserving, surgeries and operations and gone all the way to Germany for, diagnosis and potential treatments over there. And like, we've done some really extreme things to preserve my life. Those are different
Yeah.
than investing in your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say, if you're not intentional, you'll succumb to
Yeah.
these
It's
diseases,
like
these illnesses.
it's like you have to be really vigilant
You do.
about it. And I love what you said about continually adding tools, because yeah, life's just going to continue to
Yeah.
throw weird stuff at you,
Yeah.
especially if you have like, yeah, you have these rare syndromes. Like, yeah, you just have to find new ways to battle.
Yeah. Constantly.
Yeah.
And there's you have one challenge that you're dealing with, you're going to get like 6 more,
Yeah.
within a course of a 12-month period.
Yeah.
Big challenges.
Right. You know
So
what? I feel like I've learned more as an adult that has just gone through more crap. I've realized, and maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I used to find some utility in thinking, well, one day I will get to a place where there is just complete peace and happiness, and then things will be good.
right.
Right. And I think it's just kind of a naive thought. And I think you have to find peace and happiness just in everything, in your
Oh, yeah.
in your whole journey, and realize there will be little valleys of peace and there will be little valleys of joy. And in those moments you fall to your knees and you're grateful.
Yeah.
But then a hurricane will come through
Yeah.
and someone will die and someone will break your heart and someone will ruin someone's life that you know.
Yeah.
And you just have to be like, I don't know, you can't be resentful and like bitter in those moments. You just have to be like, that's life,
Yeah.
and let me take joy in like you said, these little moments of peace that you have. And maybe it's just 15 minutes driving home, and maybe the day was a disaster and you feel horrible, but then you have whatever 20 minutes before bed with your kids, and that's peace.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
and it's not, when will things finally be good? It's, let me find the good now.
Oh, that's well said. I mean, I had an expectation for how my life
Yeah.
was going to end up, and it is like nothing.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Every dream that I had
Mm-hmm.
has either been I've pivoted or I've lost that dream.
Yeah.
Um, and in some ways that hurts, and in
Mhm.
other ways it's like, oh, thank goodness that God directed me in a different way,
Yeah.
because this is much more beautiful than I had planned.
Yeah.
But one of the things that has been so poignant for me throughout this experience with myself and my story and all the stories that I tell is that when people say focus on the little things, that is a trained skill, not
Mhm.
just a nice idea that you can
Yeah.
apply whenever you feel like it.
Uh-huh.
It is something that you need to learn how to focus on and train yourself and calm
Yeah.
your nervous system down
Mhm.
so that you can actually see the little things. And what I mean by that is when I do my speeches for companies or, organizations or youth, I always talk about, how do you see those small moments? And one of the things that my physical ailments taught me is that you can actually live with your soul. I believe all of us have a soul, a
Uh-huh.
spirit inside of us. You can live with that on the surface.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is we don't just succumb to our physical frailties or circumstances. We actually live the way we're supposed to live. And I didn't know you could live like that in this mortal experience.
Mhm.
I didn't know you could live with that soul on the surface. And that's what I was saying earlier with, you can almost see it in someone's eyes
Yeah.
when they're living that way. And my physical frailties taught me that.
Right.
Having near, death experiences taught me
Mhm.
that. And what it did was it allowed my spiritual eyes to be present
Yeah.
instead of just my mortal eyes. And without getting too deep into that, what it gave me was a chance to see beauty, I believe, the way God sees it.
Mm.
And I started to have these moments where I would come home from work so stressed. I'm a creature of habit. I'd put my backpack down and in the mudroom, and I'd open that door, and I knew there would be noise because we have 4 little kids.
Mhm.
Knew there'd be chaos. We'd be worried about dinner, worried about games, worried about,
Mhm.
all these things that we had to get to. And one of the things that I found so much peace in that allowed me to focus on the small moments was watching my kids eat. As
Mm.
funny as that
Yeah.
sounds,
Yeah.
I started to watch how each of my kids ate.
Yeah.
And I remember this morning once where I was watching 3 of my kids eat their cereal,
Mhm.
and they were all doing it so differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, I can't even describe it, but if you can just visualize this 3-year-old holding the spoon wrong,
Yeah.
milk going all over the place, trying to chase down a couple Cheerios in their
Uh-huh.
milk, and being really ineffective at eating their cereal.
Yeah.
And then picture the next kid that's got a little bit older that has a better grip on the spoon and is just chowing down, but his face is really messy.
Yeah.
And he probably spilled a few drops on his shirt.
Uh-huh.
And then the oldest one being a little more, proper. And anyway, you can just go through each kid. And I was noticing these little things. And just the way my little daughter, 2, 3 years old, was holding the spoon was beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And I used to be so, they say don't get upset over spilled milk. I still sometimes do that. But I learned that that spilled milk was actually beautiful.
Yeah.
It was something that I could pay attention to that reminded me maybe of what God thinks of us down here messing up and making mistakes.
Yeah.
And I can't explain it other than I saw my kids in a different way.
Yeah, it's almost like you saw how individual they were.
Yeah.
And you kind of saw, I felt like when you were talking about the soul, it's almost like you're trying to live in a way where your soul is more accessible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then in doing that, everyone else's soul becomes more accessible. And so
100%.
You don't just see your kids as just kids and, they're eating dinner and, okay, let's wrap this up so we can freaking go to bed.
Yeah.
I see my kids as these perfect little beings that I created.
Yeah.
And I see, I don't know, you can probably see a little bit into their future, and you can see I don't know, kids are so interesting because you can kind of have flashes to your past and be like, wow, did I hold this spoon like an idiot? Did I do you ever have a moment with your kids where you're like, who knows if this will be a core memory, but I wonder if it is.
Oh yeah.
Because you have core memories are kind of random, like the things you remember and the things you forget, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. And so sometimes I don't have kids, but I'll be with my little nieces and nephews and I'll be like, dang it, dude, I wonder if they'll remember this.
Yeah.
Because this is such a cool moment. And maybe it's just special for me and I'm, I'm an adult. I've been through more things. So I'm recognizing the beauty of the moment and they're just playing. They're just having fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I often wonder about that.
Yeah, it's those unplanned, things that we always think core memories are oh, we took our kids to Disneyland.
Yeah.
We actually did that 18 months ago. And in my mind, my expectation for Disneyland was very different than I think most people.
Yeah.
I think most people were trying to force a core memory on their family by taking them to Disneyland.
We're going to have fun.
Yeah. This will be the most beautiful, fun place. It's supposed to be the most beautiful and fun place on earth. And I remember thinking to myself, this is just a thing that we're going to do together. And if our kids have a core memory happen because of this, great. But you know what the core memory was? It was going to the beach.
Yeah.
And that's what it was for me growing up, because we had so much family in California that we traveled there every single summer. And I do remember going to Disneyland with my family. I'm grateful for my parents for sacrificing to get us to a point where financially they could take us, and that wasn't easy for them. Those things are beautiful. There's sacrifice, there's love that goes into it. So I'm not saying don't take your kids to Disneyland.
Yeah.
But it feels like a more of a forced core memory versus a naturally beautiful experience that was unplanned.
Yeah.
And that's where I just think those are the things I remember that changed me. I just thought while you were talking, because what you said and combining that with my experience with eating breakfast, another time my boys, they're only 16 months apart, for better or worse. Sometimes they're little tiny terrorists and other times they're just best of friends, and it's the most awesome thing. But one morning on a Saturday when I was home and didn't leave for work early, they went outside to eat their breakfast. It wasn't even warm, I don't think. And they're in their pajamas, no shoes on. There were so many things wrong with the situation, trying to take the milk out there, the cereal out there, and just making an absolute mess because they wanted to eat outside.
Yeah.
And I said, why are you guys doing this? And I'll never forget, they said, we wanted to see the sunrise. And I was like, Isn't that beautiful? Like, just to think that that had crossed their mind when they
Yeah.
woke up, that they could do a lot of things, have a
Mhm.
lot of fun. But what would be the most fun and the most beautiful would be eating their cereal outside and the peace and quiet and watching the
Oh
sunrise.
yeah. Yeah.
Like, it was so cool because my initial gut reaction to that was, you don't have your shoes on,
Yeah.
put a jacket on,
Right.
you're making a mess out here, put a
Yeah.
tablecloth over the picnic table, you're
Right.
spilling
Right.
everywhere.
Right.
Um, we're gonna have mice out here because you guys spilled your cereal everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
all those things that we're thinking that are beneficial for our kids because we're
Mhm.
teaching them how to be responsible,
Yeah.
throw that crap out the window.
Yeah.
Like, just focus on those little moments and let your kids have those moments instead of robbing them of those
Yeah. Yeah.
experiences
I like that.
because they don't fit into your predetermined
Yeah.
plan for them in every moment of every
Right.
day.
Right. Yeah. There's this little gratitude practice thing I do where I sort of just write down throughout the day. I try to just write down my favorite moments, things that stuck out to me, things that were good, things that were
No, it's awesome you
beautiful.
do that.
And what I've noticed, because I will go back and the next day, I'll go back to the previous day and I'll highlight the 2 or 3 favorite things.
Hmm.
And I've realized almost all of them are just interactions with people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's funny, like you said, like sometimes I'll go to a concert with a friend and I'll write down, went to this awesome concert, finally saw so and so play, but then I end up highlighting, but on the way home, me and Spencer were talking about this, and that was my favorite part of the
Yeah.
day.
Of
And you're
course.
like, dude, I had to go to a concert to have that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a cool practice because it makes me realize these like events that I do or these activities that I'm obsessed with, they're rarely the things that actually bring me the most joy.
Yeah.
Like even the other day, I went and played pickleball for like 5 hours with my buddy's family. And it's funny, my buddy wasn't even there, but
That's
I'm
awesome.
just like, but I love his family and we were playing for a while. And then like on the way out, I was talking to his aunt for like 20 minutes about, whatever. She's going back to school and she wants to be a therapist and all these things. And I was like, oh, I think that was actually my favorite part of the night. Even though like I love pickleball, I love
Yeah.
playing sports and
Yeah.
competing but I don't know, just these human interactions tend to be my favorite moments.
Yeah. Yeah. And putting yourself in those situations, intentionally is good. And spending time with people and just, we have somebody that's a leader at our company that's actually also a therapist. And
Mm-hmm.
he said creating safe spaces.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I love thinking about it that way. Like creating safe spaces for your kids, for your friends, for, those moments to happen. And
Yeah.
it's funny you mentioned the concert because me and my siblings have never gone to a concert before, but Yellow Card was coming
Oh, wow.
you know, is it USANA or America First,
Uh-huh.
amphitheater. And we were just really excited and we planned 6 months in advance and we were all like, yes, how nostalgic. This is like the music of our high school,
Yeah. Yeah.
junior high and high school days. And I remember it being focused on the music and the band and this nostalgia of those years for us versus like I get to go to a concert with my siblings in our adulthood when we're less cool and
Yeah.
bald and
We're
growing
less
hair that we
cool.
shouldn't grow hair
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
these places. And I just remember thinking when we got there, like there was the stress of getting to the venue and parking close enough for me that I didn't have to walk very far
Yeah.
and all those types of things. And then we got there and we were sitting next to each other and the song Ocean Avenue came on and we were just singing it out together.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've never had an experience with my sister like this.
Yeah. That's cool.
That's I'm the second oldest. She's older than me. And just watching her have that moment with us and
Yeah.
me have that moment with them and my brothers and just being silly. And my brother captured that moment, just really terrible video quality up here,
Right.
but I just remember thinking like, oh, this wasn't about seeing Yellow Card. It was just, could we get to a place where we could be comfortable and have an experience together?
Yeah.
But then just like you were saying, like afterwards going and walking and talking with them on the way back to the car
Yeah.
and laughing and taking pictures together. And like, I just think that we put too much pressure on ourselves to buy experiences, plan experiences, when if you really sat down and thought about it, I think our most beautiful experiences are pretty unplanned
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
most part. But I just think keeping up with the Joneses is at a new astronomical level now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're watching all these people on social media, and phones are so accessible now, and taking pictures is so accessible. And then now we're putting them out there for the world to see.
Yeah.
And we're thinking that that's our story. Like our story is all the cool stuff that I did,
Yeah.
you know, with my family, and these amazing trips and all this money we spent on this thing and this new house. And look at this house I'm building. I'm going to show you, you know, from studs to completion, how amazing my house is, without like maybe taking a step back and going, why are we building a new house?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, why am I going on this experience? Is it because I need an upgrade in my life? Or is it because I need true, you know, valuable experiences where I can relate with someone, love someone more, open up more about my story, be more honest and transparent with somebody? And then when you start looking at experiences like that, you start thinking, oh, I want to build a house because I want to create a sacred place where people feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to move to this place. This is what we just did. We moved away from a lot of the things that we loved and that we were comfortable with, so we could have a sacred place for ourselves
Yeah.
to heal.
Because you're out in the boondocks a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah. And we couldn't afford, you know, land where we lived, and it was rare. And so we moved 30 minutes away from everybody, which is not crazy.
Yeah.
But we moved away from the things that we were comfortable with to create that sacred space. And wouldn't you know that as people come to that space with us, they're experiencing that.
Yeah.
And we're not doing anything fancy. They're literally coming in our front door. We're sitting there with our big bay windows looking at the mountains, this panoramic view, and just having a moment together talking in peace.
Yeah.
Well, not with our kids around,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
always very peaceful,
Right.
but that's why we wanted that home.
Yeah.
It wasn't because there was some fancy this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Those are just luxuries.
Right.
And the moment I walked into that home and looked out that window and saw the mountains as clearly as I've ever seen from any house, I said, I don't care if we live in a tent here. If I wake up to that every morning,
Yeah.
I think I can feel peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what me and my wife do? We open those windows every single morning, regardless of how crappy things are at the moment,
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
difficult things we're going through, the trauma we're trying to work through. We watch the sunrise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we just take a minute to say, okay, the sun came up today. I can come do what I need to do today and show up for myself.
Right. Yeah.
That's experiencing the beauty in the moment and living with your soul on the surface versus always, to your point, looking for another thing to check a box on this list that will somehow be able to check the big box that says I'm fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah.
And never being able to check enough boxes to get to the big box.
Right. Yeah. I like how I feel like one of your tools you've added is you're sort of aggressively seeking beauty everywhere, you know, because it's one thing to try and recognize beauty and try to practice gratitude and mindfulness, but it's another thing to be like, okay, this isn't easy to do because my life is a whirlwind and my life actually has a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So I need to seek it aggressively. I got to go find it.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes it's easier, you know, sometimes it's right in front of you and you have this gorgeous view and you can't help it. But other times I'm sure you're like, man, I really got to work hard to find some beauty in this moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that happened this week. I got stressed about something, and I was feeling a lot of anxiety and some depression, and just like, what's going on? Why am I not feeling I should feel happy?
Yeah.
And I think we say that to ourselves a lot. You know, I should feel happy in this moment. And that feeling sucks.
Yeah.
Like, and some people wake up, I know people very close to me that have that feeling every single day.
Yeah.
as they're battling, a chemical imbalance, real medical things that have to do with, depression. And then others that have situational, things with their mental health. And it's all the same. It still sucks.
Yeah.
It's still hard. But I was having one of those moments and somebody kept suggesting you need to do meditation, like formal meditation, like practice that. And it's a practice. And I've done versions of that and I've done the formal practice of meditation, and I would kind of have my own versions that I do. And I was like, all right, this keeps coming up. My wife started doing it. This person suggested it, a dear friend of mine. And wouldn't you know it, I wasn't feeling good last night with my health. I went to bed knowing I'm probably going to wake up like this. It's going to be a rough day tomorrow.
Yeah.
And this is this morning. And I'm just exhausted. Coached my kids standing on my feet for an hour, which is a huge sacrifice for me. And I would do it any day of the week because I love my boys and I love basketball. And so it's been really rewarding. But I came home last night just like, I'm done. Yeah. I'm spent. I don't know if I can make it through the rest of the week. And I don't think those thoughts are unhealthy, because I think that's just recognizing the situation. I go to bed and I wake up at 5 a.m. after not being able to go to bed till midnight or fall asleep till midnight. And I think, oh man, like I needed rest.
Right.
And so there was this feeling inside of me because of where I'm at in my journey that was, you need to take these moments right now and do something with this. You're awake for a reason. And so I went and did a meditation in our gym downstairs, gym/office. And I was just by myself in this quiet house before the sun came up. And I was able to have this peaceful 25-minute meditation. And wouldn't you know it, God gave me some really clear information and downloads or inspiration. Yeah. And I think I used to miss that. I used to say, gosh, and just be pissed off, frankly, that I woke up early and didn't feel good. Yeah. But instead it's like, what can I do with this moment? And to your point, like intentionally seek out something beautiful that can happen for me. Yeah. And if you do that, I'm just telling you, there's no limit to the inspiration you'll receive. Yeah. There's no limit to the direction you'll get. No limit to just the joy that you can feel in one of those moments where might be chaos going on all around you. Yeah. Because you put yourself in that situation when you're still, you're just still in your being and still in your soul. Good things can happen. But you have that's work. Right. To do that. Right. That is not a casual observance that you can just will just happen.
Yeah, it's like anything, it's a skill.
Yeah.
And it takes practice. Tell me how you fell in love with your wife.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Both of us, she's from Seattle area, and I'm from Farmington, Utah, and we both, quote unquote, happened to be in the same place at the same time. I was visiting one of my close cousins that's my age that I grew up with from California. He was at BYU. He was in Provo and I was visiting him. She was visiting her friend that was in Provo, and we met at a pool. So our joke is always that we met half naked.
Right, but, good. Yeah.
But we met at a pool, and I remember after meeting her, getting in the car with my friend, going home and being like, if I married somebody that good looking, like check that box. Like this would be the best thing in the world. Yeah. But I was just drawn to her eyes. That was something that I actually complimented her on her eyes that day, because she kind of drew me in. Yeah. And it was her soul, her spirit. I just didn't know that yet because I didn't know her. And I wasn't emotionally mature at the time. So I just thought she was this hot lady that I was, hopefully I get a chance to date. And we dated long distance for about 9 months. After that point, she started dating somebody else, and I had to wait in the wings and be respectful till that was over.
I
hate
then being respectful.
I know it was tough. Yeah. But I kept saying to her, I would reach out every once in a while and just say,
some check-ins.
Are you still, are you available or still dating? Right. And she always respected that as soon as she told me she was dating somebody, I would just say, that's great. Yeah. I hope things are going well, and I would leave it alone.
Yeah. But you're like, but guess
But
who's waiting?
yeah, I'm available is what I was saying.
Yeah.
And I started going to business school and got really busy. And then she reached out to me and just said, basically, I'm available now. You want to go on that date we never
Yeah,
had?
yeah, yeah.
And so that started a bunch of dates, flying back and forth with each other, thinking we really knew each other. But, when you only spend a weekend with each other once a month, you don't really know each other. But we fell in love really fast.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of our getting to know each other and journey. And we got married within about a year of when we first met.
What was it about her? And, like you said, maybe you didn't recognize it at first, but what was it about her soul that felt a little bit different?
Yeah. So if you meet Caroline, we call her Sweet Caroline, we love that at football games and basketball games when Neil Diamond comes on. But she just has this warmth about her. And she gives really good hugs. My family was like the worst huggers,
really?
Like side huggers.
Oh, no.
And it just casual huggers. And then Caroline came into the family and it was like, oh, this is how you physically love someone,
Yeah.
And she just always wanted to be close. And there's a running joke that if you're not careful, she'll sit on you. And it's because she just wants to be close to you.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have constant bruises on my thighs because I'm not ready for her to sit, but she just wants to be close.
Yeah.
And she'll do that with anybody. And just like I said earlier, she'll sit in that safe space with you. And I can't tell you how many people that have my syndromes have come to our home, and Caroline's just sat with them.
Yeah.
And allowed them to share their story and have that sacred experience together. And many times they're sitting right next to each other and she's got her arm around them.
Yeah.
And she's just snuggling them.
Right.
And so that would be how you would describe Caroline.
Yeah.
And she's been through her own difficult, upbringing and journeys, and it hasn't been easy for her. And I think that's another reason why she loves so big.
Yeah.
Is because she wants to give some of those things maybe she felt like she was missing. And she wants to give the tools that she's acquired over the years, including an understanding of the gospel and our Savior Jesus Christ and his love and forgiveness and all these things that she's learned through the gospel. She's ready and willing to give that to other people, including our kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I love about her most. And then second to that, to answer your question even further, is she believes in people. Like she believes in me. And we've taken some crazy risks over the years, but both of us felt spiritually inspired to do so. And it wasn't like, oh, I only believe in God. It was like, no, I believe in Dan.
Yeah.
And us to be able to accomplish what God has for us. And that's been such a beautiful thing for me, because I've never, not once, gone home or gone to work or gone out to do something that I feel called to do and gone, I wish my wife believed in me.
Yeah.
And believed that this would all be worth it.
You just know she has your back.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Even at her lowest points, I never once was like, gosh, my wife doesn't believe in me. Because I've seen that in people's relationships, and it's hard to live a life, especially with a partner or a spouse, when they don't fully believe in you. It's makes for some uncomfortable dinners and uncomfortable car rides. I've never had those with Caroline because we've had uncomfortable things happen in our lives and difficult things and conversations for sure. But it's never once been about, I wonder if my wife believes that I can pull this off.
Yeah. I feel like, because I know some guys like that, right? That I'm not convinced their wives believe in them, and it's almost like they become a shell of themselves.
Yeah, it's hard. They're working to probably live up to an expectation that they may never meet.
Yeah. Or just walking around feeling inadequate all the time. Or feeling like, like I love my spouse, but they're not really in this foxhole with me.
Yeah.
I'm kind of by myself.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. What do you feel like it's like to be the spouse of someone who has a lot of chronic illnesses? What is that sort of cross that she has to bear?
Good question. Not many people ask that, about our situation or think about her, because they watch my battle and they think about how hard that is for me
Hmm.
personally, but um, it's been hard on her. And you asked earlier about mental health. Like that's something we're transparently talking about between ourselves and with our kids, and getting better at doing that.
Yeah.
Because we've both been silent for many years
Hmm.
about some things that we've dealt with, some thoughts that we've had, some difficulties, some insecurities that we've had,
Yeah.
and we're being more blunt and honest about those. And it's been a really good thing. And that's where, when you have a partner or a spouse, or a parent or a good friend that's going through something like I've been through for years now, uh, it's called trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's real trauma.
Yeah. And
Uh,
there's no reason to call it anything else, probably.
no, like I think people are kind of minimize it, like, oh, that stinks that your spouse has this chronic thing. I'm like,
Hmm.
it's hard on everybody.
Yeah.
It's hard on my kids.
Yeah.
And I'll give you one poignant example, and I promise I'm not meant to just be here to try to make people cry. This will make you cry, just because it was a moment for our family that woke us up.
Hmm.
And it was when we were having a family prayer at night. We weren't very good at it. We were trying to do that together. It was something we were trying to do in the depths of my physical health
Hmm.
battle. And I couldn't kneel down. Didn't feel good enough to do that. So I was laying in a lazy boy that's in my boys', room with their bunk bed. And my kids were kind of scattered on the bunk bed and on the floor and stuff. And my boy was on the top bunk. And we asked him to say the prayer that night. His name's Jackson. He's got these beautiful blue eyes and, just this warm personality. He's the best kid. And he's up there on the top bunk and he starts his prayer. And if you've ever prayed with kids, you're just like, where's this going? I have
Yeah.
no idea what's going to be said. No idea if this prayer is going to end with a spiritual experience or just full on laughter.
Right. Right.
And it's usually laughter because our kids say ridiculous things. But he begins his prayer and he, just said some pretty traditional things. And then he said, please bless that my dad won't die. And then he said, in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. And like, I felt like that wrecked my entire being,
Yeah.
because I had no idea, because we weren't open at the time about our mental health,
Hmm.
about dad's situation with our kids, because we thought they were too young.
Yeah. Yeah.
We made that mistake.
Hmm.
They were watching these really scary procedures, surgeries, dad being in the ER, dad traveling to Germany, dad, you know, having big, his stomach opened up, and these really traumatic things for them, and never thought, like, we should probably talk to them about mortality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we heard that from our kid, we were like, whoa.
Right.
Took a step back and we started to have those tough conversations with our kids. I don't even remember your original question, but that
Yeah.
hopefully that
Yeah.
answers it. But that's where it's just been a different experience for us now, because we talk about that stuff, and now we're communicating with our kids and saying, look, dad's in a place where I'm still struggling a lot,
Hmm.
some days, but the risk is different.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we're at the brink of death. And,
Hmm.
and then I'll even ask my kids, are you worried that something's going to happen to dad?
Yeah.
And our kids are more comfortable about talking about it now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So yeah, what is good advice for maybe a couple that is struggling and has young kids and they're like, oh, I don't know, are they too young?
yeah.
How do we have these conversations? Like, I was thinking about that watching Breaking Into Beautiful. Like, she has, like a 4-year-old daughter or whatever. And I'm like, oh, the kid barely understands, but the kids are smart and
They're way smarter than you think.
they're observant and they just soak everything in. And so yeah, do you tell your kids, hey, like, mommy, like, there's a chance mommy might not make it, like,
Yeah.
or is that more traumatizing than, but the fact that, in hearing that prayer, it sounds like it probably broke your heart because you never thought, oh, my kid's worrying about his dad
Yeah.
dying.
100%. Yeah. I think instead of worrying about how do I approach this big conversation, I think you got to take one-on-one time with your kids and
Uh-huh.
just say, what do you think is going on in our
Yeah.
home?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you, and I've asked my 8-year-old that, or almost 8-year-old, I said probably 2 weeks ago, when he was worried about me one night, because I try to play basketball with him, just shoot hoops with him, play a little one-on-one, low impact game with him. And he wants me to do that every night. He's the kid that's just like, I'll get up with you, Dad, at 6 a.m. and work out with you.
Yeah.
Like, he's in the gym working out with me. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But like, I can't keep up with him.
Right.
He's 8
right.
and I'm
Yeah.
almost 40. And one night I just said, I'm sorry, son. I do not feel good enough to go do that with you, but I'd love to sit and, watch a movie with you or do something right here on the couch. And he got this worried look on his face. And I said, you're worried about Dad's health, aren't you? And he said, yeah. And I said, what are you worried about? What are you thinking about? And the light bulb clicked for me that it's not about me trying to fix his problem. It's not about me coming up with this great speech I can give my kid that's in the movies and scripted content. Like, oh man, that was such a beautiful moment. It was about asking my son a simple question. What's going on in that little head of yours?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think those are the conversations that you need to have with your kids versus some, gosh, how am I going to talk to them about this really tough thing?
Yeah.
What are you worried about with me and Mom's relationship?
Right.
What are you worried about with, when we talk about chores, you kind of overreact. What are you concerned about?
Yeah.
And then working through those with them because they're giving you the answer versus trying to pre-diagnose them with their worries or with their thoughts. Because man, kids' heads, if adults' heads are spinning all the time, how are we going to figure out these kids that are thinking about gummy bears and astronauts one second and, Dad's health the next second?
Yeah. I heard this podcast with Dax Shepard, and he talks a lot about recovery and mental health and stuff, and he was saying one night him and his wife were having a little dust up about something, and their daughter, like, he went to say goodnight to her and she started crying, and she's like, are you and Mommy gonna get divorced? And he goes, I love what he said. He's like, listen, even if X, Y, and Z happened, like, I wouldn't divorce your mom. And if she decided to leave me, I would buy the house next door and I would see you every day. And so that's not going to happen, but let me put you at ease. Like, our family's going to be okay no matter what.
Yeah.
And just a cool way to, like, not, like, I think a lot of times parents are just too afraid to say anything to kids because they're like, I don't want to mess up my kid. I don't want to,
I don't want them to worry about that.
Yeah.
Guess what? They're already worried about it.
Exactly. Like, just be straight up with them and give them the facts, I think.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because we have this good friend named Joel, and I'll always be just so grateful for Joel because during some of my lowest moments with my health where we were struggling with our kids, our daughter had a lot of anxiety, our oldest, and she's always been really perceptive and she feels everything. She's an empath. She's, she just can feel tangibly the emotion in a room.
Yeah.
And she was really struggling at that time. And I had this inspiration one day to call up my buddy Joel that had horses, had a little farm that he kept his horses, a farm property that he kept his horses on. And I said, Joel, my daughter loves horses. Can she just come work on the farm with you guys whenever you guys go over there? And he was like, absolutely. So one lesson I learned through this health experience was not being afraid to ask for help because people have the answers.
Yeah.
So I was humble enough at that time, almost compelled to be humble because I couldn't do a lot of this stuff on my own. And he had offered to support me in my journey. So I took him up on it. And I said, well, how can Joel help? Can you just let my daughter tag along with you? She was like 7 or 8 at the time. And he took her to Cal Ranch, got her some muck boots, got her a Carhartt jacket, got her everything she would need to work on the farm and stay warm during the winter with them. And she just spent time with him. She was literally picking up horse crap. And this experience changed her life because Joel took interest and his daughter that competitively rode took interest in her, spent all this time with her, and even gave her this sweet little barn with horses that she built with her grandpa that she was too old to play with.
Yeah.
And they gave all these, there were physical gifts, but there was these emotional gifts that they gave. And I remember just thinking, oh, this wasn't my problem on my own to solve.
Yeah.
There's other tools, other people, other resources out there. And whether I want to admit it or not, my daughter is struggling.
Yeah.
And if I'm just going to sit in those feelings and just let her struggle, that is a choice. But there's a better choice.
Yeah.
And it's to look at the situation for what it is, not what I want it to be.
Yeah.
And stop ignoring the problem and just have conversations with her. And pretty soon she's at the farm and talking about conversations we're uncomfortable to have with our kids. Joel has the birds and the bees talk with my daughter. He's been through it with his teenage kids and, and it's because they were talking about these horses getting pregnant.
Right.
And my daughter comes home and is like, look what Joel taught me, you know?
Yeah.
And we're like, oh no. But then we were like, well, that was an okay, we trusted Joel. That was an okay situation, an okay environment, safe environment for her to understand some things about life. But Joel wasn't uncomfortable, about making sure that she felt safe and she was, in a place with his daughter and him that they could learn about these horses and do the work and all these lessons that she learned. I will always cherish that time. We gave him a hard time for saying, hey, you ruined it. We were supposed to have the birds and the bees talk. But that's just where, you can put some trust in those people around you to make sure that, they have a part in your story and your journey. If they're offering to be a partner, not just an acquaintance in your story, then let them be a partner. Yeah. If you trust them, let them be a partner and support you during those times.
Yeah, I like that. I think, we talked about how this really almost definitionally for your wife and your kids can be very traumatic, right? But I also think for your kids, especially, like, they're almost lucky because they have the ability to be so much more empathetic than a lot of kids. They have the ability to express love in maybe a unique way. Like I saw that video of like your daughter like tying your shoes. Yeah. And oh man, that makes me emotional because I was just like, she has such a cool opportunity right now to like just show love to her father that like it's an experience that she probably won't forget either. No. And to be able to be a kid and to be able to like help an adult like that, it's such a unique experience. Yeah. And I think it really forms their character. And so, yeah, there's probably a lot of traumatic things and some really hard moments, but I think ultimately your kids are being formed into more evolved humans.
Yeah, like the best way I can put it is I felt like we were ruining our kids' childhood. Yeah. Like from a young age, we faced brutal financial situations where people were dropping off food to us and we were calling our, church leader and saying we can't pay our rent. Like just brutal stuff for years. We can't go do this thing because we don't have the resources to do it. And they were kind of used to that. And I remember just thinking, I did not want them to grow up like this. Yeah, yeah. Did not want them to experience, childhood like this. And we're robbing them of their childhood. And I actually had a couple other chronic illness moms reach out and say, you're not ruining their childhood. You're giving them a really impactful childhood. Yeah. You're teaching them empathy in a way that cannot be taught any other, in an effective way. And that video you referenced with my daughter, like I look back now and how beautiful those moments were where I couldn't bend down to tie my shoes, but I needed to go somewhere. And sometimes it was early in the morning or sometimes, she wasn't around and I had to try to figure out how am I going to do this on my own? Yeah. And my daughter started tying my shoes, like not because I was going and seeking her out and trying to find her, she saw that struggle
Mm-hmm.
and she started to do it for me. And it was so imperfect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like they weren't tight. Like one shoe would be really tight and the other one would be really loose. And it felt
Yeah.
like it was going to fall off. But like
Yeah.
she could barely tie her own shoes. And now
Mm-hmm.
she's tying her dad's shoes. And then I noticed when I was walking around with a walker full time, we would go to the grocery store and I didn't want to not go to the grocery store just because I was on a walker.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, gosh, I'm going to run into somebody that's going to be embarrassing. And old man Dan's walking around Smith's or whatever.
Yeah.
And she started to hold on to the walker. And at first I thought, oh, that's cute. But then I realized what she was doing is she was worried about her dad falling.
Yeah, yeah.
And she was paying attention to those little things. And then she was asking if she could carry stuff for me.
Yeah.
And that moment that I captured with my phone, that was a really sacred moment that I was hesitant of sharing it online, was just one morning when I needed to go to physical therapy, I think, and she was up early and I would go pretty early to physical therapy, and she offered to tie my shoes.
Yeah.
And I was on the stairs feeling just worthless and incompetent, incapable, like whatever you want to say. And she just was like right there ready to do that for me. And now I have a video to remind her in her days ahead that are going to be tough. Like, you do know how to show up for yourself and for other people. And you did that so beautifully for me. And as she's going through her own struggles right now, I just hope and pray that she just leans on those times from her childhood that are still going on, frankly.
Right, sure.
That she can lean on those and just say, you know, this is better than if we would have grown up rich and having everything that we needed without relying on anybody else, and having a dad that was completely healthy, or a mom that was healthy. Like that's what we hope. That they'll remember that.
Right.
And I think for the most part, they're not for the most part, they are very compassionate souls.
Right. Yeah. And that's
because of this.
Oh man, sorry, I'm getting so emotional. I think I'm just like, I'm thinking about my sister.
Yeah.
You know, that has these same syndromes, and how hard her life has very suddenly become.
Yeah.
You know, and she has 3 crazy kids, and and then thinking about, growing up, my dad had some pretty dark years with depression, but I don't feel like it did anything negative, but made me more compassionate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I hope people that, go through these horrible things and have kids can realize that, I mean, listen, anything can mess up your kids, but they can mess up their own lives.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
Life's tough, and who knows what's going to happen, but like, I don't think because their parents are struggling that it's going to ruin their lives. I think it has a chance to make their lives really beautiful.
Yeah, we kind of jumped to that. Like, I call it worst case scenario syndrome.
Yeah.
I did a whole webinar on it with people with chronic illness for this app that we built that was, for chronic illness support, because we just saw this need that everybody was like feeling inadequate, feeling like they weren't enough or worthy. So we started this webinar series that we do every week, and I call it worst case scenario syndrome. Like, we all go to this worst case scenario. What if our kid gets pregnant when they're a teenager?
Yeah.
That would be the end of the world, right? Well, I used to think that, but now I'm like, oh, what an awesome opportunity to bond with my kid over something difficult.
Yeah.
But I know that they've been taught and they've watched how resiliency works in our home.
Yeah.
And they've seen the imperfections of me and my wife.
Yeah.
They've seen us not show up for ourselves sometimes and for each other, and they've seen us show up for each other, and they've seen that it is not perfect. And our kids sometimes will say, like, you just expect me to be perfect. And we just laugh because we're like, look at us.
Yeah.
We are so imperfect.
Yeah.
But if you're not careful, your kids they just think that every decision they make could lead to a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, we always think every decision we make as parents could lead to a worst case scenario. What is worse is if we don't take those opportunities to talk about the imperfections and to tell your kids that you screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think our generation is starting to be better at that, hopefully,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Than our parents' generation, and every generation moving forward will just be better and better talking about mental health, talking about mistakes we're making as parents. But I think that's the key, is not jumping to that worst case scenario and teaching your kids that, like, just because we made a mistake doesn't mean that all the dominoes are going to fall.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Maybe a couple are going to fall, but guess what? There's something called forgiveness. There's something called repentance. There's something called, reconciliation. And we can go through that process with you.
Yeah.
And there's some things that have bigger consequences.
Yeah.
And making sure that your kids understand those. But is there anything else you can do? No. Kids do dumb things. Stop asking your kids, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Because we as parents do dumb things.
Yeah.
And we're asking ourselves that question. And
your brain's
asking,
way more formed than
yeah,
theirs.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say, kids aren't they're probably more emotionally intelligent than we think they are, but they are deeper thinkers, but they're just not emotionally intelligent yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so our job as parents is to not shut down the deep thinking. It's to ask them those questions. Like I said earlier, what are you thinking about?
Right.
Not what are you thinking, but what are you thinking about right now? What are you worried about?
Yeah.
And I found with my kids, it's amazing. Like when they're like freaking out and they say, I'm just so worried about this test tomorrow. And you finally get it out of them, and you're like, oh, there's such relief knowing why they're freaking out and not doing their chores and being disrespectful. But you have to take it a step further.
Yeah.
Why are you so worried about this test? Oh, well, because of this, and that. Is this something you worry about constantly? Yeah, I do. Why? And then you just keep asking why.
Yeah.
And then suddenly your daughter's like, I feel stupid in my class.
Yeah.
It's not about that test. It's about the way I learn. And I learn differently than my classmates. Oh, okay. Now as a parent, I'm like, I need to figure out how my kid learns so I can support them better. So you see how it's very different than just going to that worst case scenario and say my kid's going to flunk out of elementary school.
Right. Right.
And they're never going to get a high school diploma,
Yeah.
college diploma, all that. That's where our minds go.
Yeah.
That's not what this is about.
Yeah.
This is about you helping them figure out what their insecurity is, and then fueling whatever, passion they have, or fueling, tools and resources that you can build into them.
Yeah. I love that approach. How healing for you has been your work in creating films and directing and producing?
Yeah, there's no limit to the perspective that I am going to get through this process. I have thousands of perspective moments I could share. It'd be the longest podcast in history because of all these amazing humans I've been able to tell their stories and direct their stories, and my teams directed their stories and produced them. So, I mean, for me, make no mistake about it, the person that benefits, I think, the most through this experience of telling people stories is me.
Yeah.
Because I get to spend time in those safe places with all of these people in those edit bays, combing through interviews and talking with my team about how we can honor people's stories more and tell them, more powerfully, and then adding music to it and all these other elements. And just by the end going like, whoa, like my life is forever changed because of that story. And we're going to do that again tomorrow.
Yeah. It's almost like the perfect, like, way to combat depression, because it's like, how can I, like my life is hard and I'm going through this and I'm going through this, but when you're adding light to your life every single day, it kind of keeps the darkness away.
Yeah. It's
because
been very good at that.
Yeah. You're doing really fulfilling work. And it's funny. I've joked around about this with my podcast, and my art is, I'll say, like, honestly, it's a very selfish enterprise because I, regardless of if this episode does well and we have a clip that goes viral, like, those things are great and hopefully they help other people. But ultimately, like, it was great for me, and it was cathartic for me, and it was beautiful for me. But the reality is, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Anytime it's that catharsis and beauty for yourself, you're like, well, I know it will be for others,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And that's the chain reaction of these connections that we make through these lessons, through these people and experiences. And I think at the end of the day, like I heard this quote once about Oprah Winfrey being asked like how amazing her job was, and isn't that cool that you get to give away cars and
Mm,
all these things that she was doing that felt really glamorous.
yeah.
And she said, "Do you think that's what I do all day?"
Mm-hmm.
And her response was basically like 95% of what I do is really hard work that no one wants to do,
You're right.
and 5% of it is what you see on TV.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there's something to hard work.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to dedicating yourself to a craft and to your calling, and finding that purpose. And once you find that purpose, combining that with that hard work, that's where you find fulfillment. And then all the perspective comes, from there, because you put yourself in a situation to be able to receive that.
Yeah.
And so I always encourage people that are struggling, you got to find purpose in your pain, or
Mm-hmm.
else it will just be pain.
Yeah.
It'll just be misery, right? And at the end of the day, if you can find your calling, it carries you through those, to your point, through those depressing, whether situational or chronic
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
depression, anxiety, all the emotions, big emotions that we have. If you're living your calling and living your purpose, I always say the biggest thing you can do for yourself is get yourself in alignment,
Mm-hmm.
alignment with God or a higher power, or universe, whatever you want to call it, because that will get you out of bed every day.
Yeah.
I have to convince myself every single day to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And the only thing that makes me rise with the sunrise is because I know I'm in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
When that sun comes up, I know I'm in alignment with God. And that's enough for me to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And if you're missing that, you succumb to whatever you're going through. You sit in your thoughts and you don't move.
Yeah.
You don't get on stage like Oprah does and do good and help a lot of people, because you won't do all the work that leads up to that. So you got to just be relentless in that pursuit of alignment
Yeah.
and finding your purpose and calling.
Yeah. Do you ever get, I'm sure it's not really in the form of actual criticism, but do you get people that are like, hey, I'm sure these are great, but I can't watch these sad movies. I can't watch these heartbreaking documentaries you make. It's too much for me. What is your retort to that? Because I have my own thoughts, and I think there's a lot of utility in that. Real quick, this quote I love, I wanted to share this, by Arthur Miller. He says, I think the job of an artist is to remind people of what they have chosen to forget.
Hmm.
And I think that I think you do that really well. And I think that's part of your vision, whether you articulate it as such or not.
Yeah, that's a fascinating quote. I love that quote, because at the end of the day, if you choose to sit in one of our stories in
Mm-hmm.
that safe space,
Yeah.
and listen to someone else's perspective on life,
Mm-hmm.
and see their experiences in a beautiful cinematic way, your life will forever be changed, and you'll be called to do something different with your life.
Yeah.
And if there's resistance, it means that you're resisting. Not, I think at a surface level, you're saying, I don't want to feel emotion.
Uh-huh.
But at a deeper level, you're saying, I don't know if I'm ready to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
if I watch one of the Stiry films, I'm going to have to do something different with my life.
Yeah.
And that's scary. That's okay if you're in that place.
Right.
We kind of put it into kind of this growth map, and we call it casual observers. So casual observers are like, yeah, I'll watch a story every once in a while when it's convenient,
Yeah.
when I feel like feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perspective seekers are the ones that are like, gosh, I love listening to podcasts. I love watching these inspirational films. Sometimes I'll move forward with my life and do something different, and other times I like getting perspective, and I'm going to
Yeah.
just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's these people that are relentless visionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And the relentless visionaries were at one point maybe in a casual observer, perspective seeker, and then they elevated their life to this point where they are relentless and not only finding the perspective, but doing something with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are the people that are just the change makers, the movers that you like want to sit in a podcast with. And I can tell you're one of those people because the way you think, your thoughts, the way you articulate things, you've thought about these things deeply and you've done something with those. And when you're with relentless visionaries, it's like this, like the light is on
Mm-hmm.
wherever you go, and you realize that your life's going to be different being with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The people we tell stories on, they're relentless visionaries. They're
Yeah.
people that just you are drawn to. And a lot of people are like, gosh, I don't know why I'm drawn to them. It's like, because they're doing something magnificent with a pretty ordinary life.
Right. Right.
And they're making it into something extraordinary. They're taking all those perspective moments and they're not just letting them sit. They're actually doing something and they're changing the way they live their story.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I would answer, like, oh, well, not all of our films are sad, by the
Right.
way,
Right.
but they do have emotion.
Uh-huh.
They are about tough subjects. They are about tough things that people go through. And some of them are just amazing nonprofits that figured out a way to solve a problem and they're feeding the hungry. They're,
Yeah.
doing something amazing through aerial arts or these other different, resources that they have or skills they have or talents. And so they're not all going to make you cry, but they're all going to make you feel something.
Yeah.
That maybe you should reach a little bit further to that purpose and calling.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts about like really like it's almost this conscious decision sometimes that I'm going to sit down and watch this piece of media that's going to destroy me in a good way, right? And it's like I loved it. Like last night watching your film, I loved it so much because it made me just feel like more of a human because I'm feeling things. It makes me feel like less of a robot.
Yep.
Like I feel like there's a lot of things in life that can just make you feel like a robot. You're
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to work. I'm coming home. I'm eating dinner.
Yeah, it takes you out of the monotony, right?
I'm saying hi to my friends, blah, 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 blah. But when you feel something so deeply, you're like, oh, wait, I'm actually a human.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not a robot. Like, and so if nothing else, like, yeah, maybe that doesn't elicit grand change in my life, but maybe it does. Just maybe feeling human more often does elicit grand change.
Yeah, you did things differently today.
Mhm.
I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Than you did yesterday because you watched that film.
Yeah, and I don't think you realize because it's not very quantifiable the impact of empathy. When you become a more empathetic person, it's hard to quantify and be like, yeah, in 2025, I'm 20% more empathetic. Like
Yeah,
it's hard to quantify, but I think there's no limit to the value it brings.
You know what's different about yourself and others that allow themselves to immerse in that type of media? They start to be comfortable with living with their soul on the surface.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why you see something different in those people's eyes, in your eyes, and in those that I've told stories on their eyes. You were drawn to them because they're starting to, I think sometimes it's misidentified as being comfortable in their own skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I think a lot of these people are really uncomfortable in their skin.
Yeah.
And they're trying to be better.
Right.
They can still live with their soul on the surface. And I remember being interviewed for this podcast, a dear friend of mine, Danny Deaton, and his wife and him have been doing this podcast, and they asked me, like, there's just something different about you. And I like, thank you, for recognizing that. But it wasn't like, I want to pat myself on the back. It was, I've uncovered something that I feel so deep within me that I believe there's a higher way of living during this mortal journey that allows for that spirit, that soul that's inside of us to be outside of us,
Mm-hmm.
to be present, to not be hidden. And that's who I am. That was who I was before I came to this earth.
Yeah, yeah.
And now I'm just opening my eyes a little bit to
Mhm.
say, I can be that person here.
Yeah.
I don't have to just suffer and be a warrior for suffering's sake.
Mhm. Yeah.
And be, somebody that battles. I don't want to be known as that person that
Right.
just battles.
Be a martyr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I want to be not only just in charge of my destiny and my story, but I want to live up to my divine potential.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're around people that live that way, there is something about that that just draws you in, and you're like, gosh, I want to be different. Even if you can't quantify it, like
Yeah.
you said, you want to be around those people and you want to start living that way. And it's so beautiful. I've cried with random people in airports. I've ended, meetings meetings on the plane with somebody I don't know, or engagements with people on the plane that we start talking in a level that they're like so uncomfortable with it, because they're like, I've never talked to anybody about this stuff.
Yeah.
But I've never certainly talked to a stranger about
Right.
this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But they walk away and all of a sudden they're like, I call them brothers and sisters, like they're family now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you connected on that deep spiritual level. And imagine your engagements as you went each and every day with people being that deep.
Yeah.
Regardless of who it was, where you met them at work, family, whatever. Then you start asking questions to those people that you love, like, how are you really doing? Instead of, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where your engagements start to become on this deep spiritual level, and you start adding all these other people that are powerful spirits too in your life, and you become souls that are mended together to do an important work.
Yeah.
And that's what's so beautiful about these stories. And I think it's a miss if people say, oh, that's a nice story.
Right. Right.
Like, I'm like, gosh, is that all it was for
Right,
you?
Right.
And that's okay if you're in that space where you don't want to watch one, or you watch one and say, that's a nice story. But I hope that as you watch our stories, you start seeing yourself and your own story and your soul differently, and see the stories around you differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to kind of wrap things up with just kind of saying, okay, now let's turn the tables and you're the podcaster. Do you have any questions for me? I know you don't know me very well.
No, I actually do have a question for you, and it was
Yeah.
earlier but you actually kind of answered it in a way, because I said, why, I was going to ask you, why do you do this? And do you have any additional thoughts, more than what you already shared? Because I feel like I've watched you have some perspective moments today, and I'm like, gosh, you've created a brilliant platform for yourself to heal,
Right.
for yourself to grow.
Yeah. I mean, it's cheaper than therapy,
Yeah.
No, I don't know. There's a lot of answers. I think ultimately it probably comes down to, I just love people and I love stories, and I love fleshing out ideas. I think a lot of times we have these thoughts in our head and we kind of think they make sense, but it's really jumbled up there, and it's kind of a mess. And so getting them out and asking people what they think, and a lot of questions. I try not to have these episodes be very scripted, but there's a lot of questions I end up asking everyone, because I love to hear people's answers. I love to hear when people first fell in love. I love to hear what people's definition of love is. I love to hear how people's relationships with God evolves over the years. I love to hear how people deal with their pain, because it often gives me new insights and new ideas. And then the other thing, like you said, this is exactly how I feel. Like, you have this little moment on an airplane with somebody, and all of a sudden you're like, well, that's kind of my brother for life now, right? I feel like that with all my guests, and listen, some are deeper than others, and some you feel a deeper connection with than others. But yeah, there's people that I've done episodes with that like, there's a decent chance I never see again. But if I do, I'll tell you what, it's give me a hug, and it's nothing but love. And it's like, it's almost like, yeah, dude, we were in the trenches together, for 2 hours 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just, for lack of a better articulate phrase, it's just fun, and it's just enriching. And as the platform grows, obviously more and more people hear it, and then you get to hear more from people that are affected by it. And because the reality is, my dad told me this one time, like, I had some random kid I went to high school like ran into my dad at Walmart or something and was like, "Oh, I love listening to your son's, Taylor's podcast," and my dad told me about it, and I was like, I had no idea he listened.
Yeah.
I never thought he would, but my dad said, it's a good reminder that most people that enjoy your content will never reach out and will never comment and will never send you a DM, and so the ones that do, like, you can be sure that there's many more that feel the same way.
Yeah.
And so in experiencing that, it's like, man, it's hard to, it just gives you so much perspective. It's like, man, it's hard for me to really stay down with anything because I'm constantly just having light added to my life. So it's like, you're gonna be hard pressed to get me to pivot careers and do something else,
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I can tell it fuels you and fills your cup. And as you're continuing on this journey, like, I mean, my only piece of advice for you is just continue to ask that question, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And your calling and your purpose might change several times as you're doing this. And I think you're off to something that's really, really powerful. How many episodes have you?
This is 118.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at that and look back at episode 1 and your reasons might be a little different.
Oh, they for sure are. And it was like, they were adjacent, right? They were just sort of in their embryonic stage, I guess, because initially I was just like, this sounds fun. Like, I want to talk to people. I like people. And maybe it wasn't as serious and it wasn't as deep.
Yeah.
And
you didn't know how it was going to change.
No, and I had no idea. And so I didn't have grand expectations. And now I'm like, it has started to feel like my calling and my purpose.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's tough because it takes a lot to figure out your life's purpose.
Yeah.
And a lot of people never do.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful to feel like this is one of the main reasons I was put on earth for.
That's awesome. Yeah. But you had to do the work, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to call you Oprah from now on.
Yeah.
You did the 95%.
Yeah.
To get here. That's awesome.
And it might be a while till we start giving out cars.
But, houses, cars.
We might need some more donations before that. But
that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Dan.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Yeah. It's always fun to have on someone that like has done some amazing, really esteemable things, but I don't know you from Adam, so it's fun to get to know.
Well, thanks for creating that safe space for me, allowing me to share my story and asking really deep, important questions. And I mean, my life will be different as a result of having this experience. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay, man.